Hey everybody, we're gonna do a little BMW shopping. Hey, let's go take a look at it. Really cool car. I don't think a lot of you guys have seen one of these around, but guess what? We've got one here and I'm gonna go take a look at it. Here, I'm gonna show you what this is. Sadly enough, the dealership is closed here today, but that doesn't really matter. I don't give. I'm gonna just show you that car anyway, and you tell me what you think of this thing. Is this worthy to replace an M5? Hey everybody, Mark here with exoticcarplayplace, filming back at you today to talk about more M5 material. Obviously, some of you guys probably think of me now as the M5 guy. I've done a lot of videos on the E60 M5. I'm going to keep piling them on. Obviously, you guys probably are aware that I have a Lambo and I've got an X5 and a bunch of other toys too, but I've been doing a lot of focus lately on the M5 because there's been a lot of requests for it. And so here goes another quick video. And today I'm going to talk about the oil consumption in the E60 M5. That's the V10 M5 from 2006 to 2010 was when that was produced. Now the topic of today's discussion is actually more than just the M5, because that utilizes the S85 engine, which is the 5-liter V10 motor that the M Sport division produced for BMW. This also is used in the M6. So the E63 M6 car also utilizes the same engine. So this is largely going to pertain to both cars because they both fall under the same, more or less the same criteria. They both share the same engine, and likely similar owners are going to drive them in the same kind of fashion. So you're going to expect similar oil consumption numbers. So today I just want to share that with you, how that looks. And the question, can you afford to even own these cars because of things like this? Oil consumption is a very real factor with an M car, and the E60 M5 is no different than any of the other M cars, which also share that common trait, oil consumption. They do consume more oil than most BMWs. Now, let's move this right along. I know there's been a lot of owners that say, well, you know, they just buy the M5 and they find, oh, you know what, it's not using oil. I drove it around, put on 2,000 kilometers or, 2,000 miles, and I really haven't seen much for oil consumption on the gauge. Well, often, guys, watch that gauge very closely, because sometimes the gauge level doesn't always keep up to date. And obviously, it takes time. There's a delay there. So even when you top up the oil, you turn the car on and go off for a drive, often those numbers aren't reflected right away. That doesn't mean you should add more oil. That just means give it some time to reflect on the gauge. The gauge has to get caught up, and it has to sense that, and it has to be satisfied with the level, a stable level for a period of time, and then it gives you that feedback. So that's all I have to say on that. With regarding the gauge measurement, give it time. It takes time to update. Now, because a lot of you guys are looking at these cars, the M5s, as great performance bargains, and I would honestly tell you that they are great performance bargains. But with the performance bargains, there's things that you need to know, because it is a performance, and I'll say a high performance car. You're going to have other things that you need to be aware of, and some of that actually has to do with, obviously, the oil consumption. So, regarding oil consumption in the M5, I would say, if you want the most economical car, this isn't going to be that car for you. There's videos out there that talk about the fuel consumption of these cars. It is a V10 motor. It does tend to use a substantial amount of fuel, a lot more than a lot of vehicles would. It also uses, sadly enough, because it's an M car, it's part and parcel to the M car series, and that is, it does use oil. So what amount of oil? Well, first let's say, make sure before you even go too far and start looking at, trying to evaluate your oil consumption. Maybe you have a car, or maybe you're considering, you're evaluating an existing car, a used car, and somebody brags about the oil consumption. Oh, my car doesn't use any oil. I don't know why all these other guys talk about that. It's a very common trait. Now, you got to make sure you have the right oil. Some of that, obviously, there's a lot of discussion on the different types of brands the weights, viscosities, all that kind of stuff. It's very important that you make sure you have that sorted first. Obviously, these cars have issues with rod bearings. You want to make sure you're using the right oil and that the oil is clean. But generally, as a rule, the 1060 is the preferred value. Now, the 60 being the viscosity breakdown potential at a higher temperature. So at a 60 weight, it's going to sustain a lot better resilience at the higher RPMs, higher temperatures. That's the oil you're going to want to use, a 60 weight. So when the car is hot, the 60 is going to protect it a lot more. Now again, is this an economical car? No, I keep talking about the economics of the car. That's something that I'm personally able to basically accept. I mean, a lot of the cars I've had in the past are similar, and a lot of them do use oil. The Lamborghini Gallardo is known to use some oil. I've had Porsche 911s. The old air-cooled cars, they use oil. That's a given. They're all known to use oil. Every engine technically uses a certain amount of oil, but the higher performance the car that typically runs higher RPMs and hotter, they will definitely guaranteed use more oil. What is the specified value that's accepted by the factory for that oil consumption? Well, let me explain. BMW states if you have a regular BMW engine, that car is rated, they say, no more than 1 liter per about 750 miles. So if you're within that range, you're okay. If you're outside of that, if you're using more than 1 liter per 750 miles, you might want to look at, what's going on. Maybe there's something going on here. And not only that, consider this. One thing before I mention about the M Sport cars. When you're looking at measuring your oil consumption, there's several pieces of critical criteria. Are we using the right type of oil? Are the oil levels accurate, and are we at the right point? Because oil, if you've got too much oil in the engine, what tends to happen is it creates additional crankcase pressures, and that then basically forces oil in places that it normally wouldn't reside, therefore creating additional oil consumption. So generally running at higher oil levels above the actual maximum mark it's slightly harmful to the engine, of course, but also you're going to read a higher oil consumption value. So make sure before you get started on your oil consumption measurements that your oil level is correct, you've got the right type of oil, and the third piece of criteria is that you have no oil leaks. Obviously, that's something that the factory is going to eliminate. If you've got a concerned high oil consumption rate, the first thing they're going to be looking for is leaks, because that's all it takes is a bad leak somewhere from an oil filter or anything else. You've got oil coming out of somewhere. Obviously, you're using oil. That's going to throw off the whole measurement, because really what we're concerned about is burning of oil, the internal wear of that engine, whether it's through rings or whatever, or valve guides. Those are the factors that we're looking for. We're not worried as much about maybe an oil pan leak. Those things are easy to fix. We're more worried about the internals of that engine. So if you're using oil, first make sure, eliminate that you're not leaking the oil. That's the first thing you want to make sure. So let's round this corner, come right back. What is the normal oil consumption rate for an E60 M5, which again is consistent with most of the other BMW M series cars or the Motorsport series, and that is about 2.5 quarts per 1,000 miles. Now that sounds like a lot of oil, I know it is, but again, they're considering that this is the number that you'd expect to see if you're running the car hard. This is the extreme end of that spectrum. Yeah, of course, if you're using less oil than that, that's great. But consider the fact that if you're driving the car hard for long periods of time and possibly tracking the car, you will expect higher oil consumption rates. And again, BMW is not even concerned unless you're utilizing more than 2.5 quarts per 1,000 miles. So everybody, I hope that helps. We can definitely create another video on more specifics like the types of oils, the brands, and all those kind of details. I want to share with you the oil consumption, because I know for a lot of you guys out there, you're trying to budget for these cars. You're trying to budget for oil, gas, insurance, registration, repairs and breakdowns. I've talked about a lot of these things already in previous videos, but these are all factors that come into play when a person is looking at buying a used car. Can I actually afford this car? Here is another detail. This oil, if you buy the specified oil from BMW, you're paying about $15 a quart, Canadian dollars of course, 15 bucks a liter. And I would say if you're taking any of these cars on a long haul, I've personally experienced this. I've driven the car 200 miles or about 300K to the adjacent city where I live. And what ended up happening there was I ended up using some oil. Like by the time I got to that city, I checked the oil level at a standstill after parking it and idling it for a few minutes. I ended up at a spot where I actually had to top it up. I was down a quart of oil. So that might have been a little bit excessive, but again, partially is because of, possibly when you checked at the time before, it may not have been updated and you started driving the car, and hence you had, an inaccurate reading. But just know this, always carry a spare, quart with you in the trunk. Never hurts to have that. If you're on a long highway trip, you don't want to just stop at the local gas station and drop in, a cheap 530, weight oil, from some generic brand or no-name brand. You don't want to do that. You're risking that very, very expensive engine. Make sure you have the right oil. So everybody, I hope you liked that video. I just wanted to share that with you. I know a lot of you guys have those questions and concerns. It is something that you have to consider when you're looking at buying these cars. These are not cheap cars to drive. It's, it's a risk. It's a nuisance that I've tolerated. I love these cars. I wouldn't let these factors deter me from owning this car, but you do need to know that these are real world issues that you will face when you drive the V10 BMW E60 M5. Just know that that's the facts. Okay, everybody, I hope you liked the video. You make sure you drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you guys. Share it, like, and most importantly, subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, why not? I have a lot of great content coming, guys. And if you check my archives, I have a lot of great content I've already produced. So don't be shy. Go back into my channel. Have a look around. Lots of great videos. And now that I'm up to 1 million channel views, I feel like I'm starting to build momentum, and that motivates, and that's going to bring a lot more great content, guys. So thanks again. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.